Video games, what a time to be alive. So much to choose from, but when it comes to the future of games, it looks bleak, doesn't it? Studios are closing down, games take longer than most relationships last to develop these days. What's really going on? And while the Western publishers are freaking out constantly, the East seems to be doing mostly fine, if not amazing. For example, look at this from automaton.com. It was recently confirmed that Devil May Cry 5 keeps selling like absolute hotcakes despite being years old at this point. To tell you just how crazy DMC5 is selling, when the game first released in 2019, it sold around 2+ million copies. In 2023, it sold another 2.1 million copies, and just in this latest quarter, DMC5 sold another 2.7 million copies. So wait a second, how is it doing that? Sure, part of it is because that DMC Netflix show bringing in the game series to a wider audience, I know that, but it's also because DMC5 as a video game is undeniably masterful, and that Capcom's catalog titles keep selling insanely strong no matter how long they've already been out for. You almost never really hear this happening, but how is Capcom doing this? It's not even a new thing for them, really. Look at this from 2025. DMC5 was actually Capcom's highest selling game last year, despite the game being years old at that point. And I mean, with how well DMC5 was already doing for Capcom, the single game has now gone well past 10 million units sold. The actual number of lifetime sales is somewhere close to 13 million so far. This means that DMC5 is starting to sell year over year in a similar fashion to something like Grand Theft Auto 5 even. Except for people that, love demon slaying and listening to Casey's banger soundtrack, which, I mean, who can blame them? It's awesome. Either way, this has shot DMC5 up into the Platinum League of Capcom sellers to the likes of Monster Hunter and Resident Evil as well. Actually, Resident Evil is also still selling like hotcakes too, as Radio Times reported here. Resident Evil's just making boatloads of money constantly for Capcom in the last business year ending in March 2026. As I highlighted there, Capcom sold a staggering 59 million units of games, eclipsing most Western publishers and then some, but how are they doing that? Look at this, right? Capcom sold 51, almost 52 million units the previous fiscal year, and this now means that Capcom has actually had record-breaking profits for 9 years in a row now, as I highlighted there. If you don't include Resi Requiem, the newest game, Resident Evil then as a series still sold somewhere around 20 million units in the last fiscal year alone. Of course, even games like Pragmata, that's a new IP that sold very well, gaining over 2 million in sales despite weirdos trying to destroy that game's trajectory. And it's not like Capcom's dominance is even over. The next Onimusha game, Way of the Sword, is coming this year, and so too is Mega Man Dual Override as well. That also plays with Requiem doing gangbusters and Devil May Cry 5 just selling as if it's like a new game every year since release. It just means Capcom's doing insane. In 2024 from PC Gamer, Capcom's profits were doing so well they even raised all their employees' salaries by 5%, and even increased the base salary starting for new employees as well, while the Western situation around games has become a deteriorating, nonsense monster pretty much with every passing year instead. Things aren't getting better in the West for game developers, right? They got record-breaking layoffs, as PC Gamer reported this as well in 2026, where 1/3 of US games industry workers have been laid off in the past year alone, and almost half of those layoffs, those people are still unable to find new jobs in the gaming sector following those layoffs as well. Like one anonymous responder to PC Gamer said this: "I feel like this question implies there's a justified reason for layoffs at large studios, which I can assure you there almost always is not." Another reason given for layoffs is everyone doubling down on generative AI in game development, and then you had another student looking to get into games that said this to PC Gamer as well. There aren't any jobs, everyone's getting fired, it's cooked. So what's happening really? Why is the East making record profits while the West is just falling apart? For example, there's another game coming out of China right now that will likely sell millions of copies when it releases. It's called Blood Message. It's an action game set during the 9th century of China. It's powered by Unreal Engine 5, and it looks, as you're seeing, undeniably gorgeous. Look at that game, dude. The first gameplay showcase, which is on Blood Message's official YouTube page, it already has over 10 million views, so yeah, there's interest in this. Honestly, the more I look at Blood Message, the more I think this is like the Chinese Ghost of Tsushima meets Assassin's Creed if Ubisoft actually locked in and stopped making slop all the time. I mean, it looks unbelievable. Its combat looks fluid and really awesome too. And the graphical fidelity, which I usually don't care for in games that much, even I have to admit that Blood Message, it looks really good. The way that the snow sticks to the main character's face and hair as he fights in battles, like, dude, that looks like real to me. That may as well be a real person on screen there doing those things. Like, Blood Message so far has us playing as someone named Pei Changguan. I hope I said that right, but from what I understand, understand, Blood Message will not be open world. Instead, it will be a heavily story-focused linear action game. One of these locations explored will be Shazhou City in the year 848, and another plot point will be about the bloody rebellion that a man named Zhang Yichao leads to overthrow the city of Shaozhou. So IGN, who demoed the game, said that it felt more like Chinese God of War, but far weightier in its combat with more kinetic violence. The game, from what I can read about it or tell, will not have any fantastical elements. It's going to be a hardcore, realistic depiction of war set in the heart of China. It looks great though. Really excited to play it. No idea when it comes out, but the fact there's a playable demo for the press to play, and they're showing that amount of gameplay that they already did online, it tells me that Blood Message will hopefully come in 2027, although I don't know yet. Overall though, the general impression from IGN is that Blood Message is something like a God of War meets The Last of Us that is set in a historical Chinese setting. And besides Pei, the main character, he's also accompanied by his son in the game, so yeah, I can see where they would make that connection with The Last of Us. But due to just how much interest is now in this game, I wouldn't be surprised if we see yet another mega hitter coming out of the East before long, and man, it just keeps happening. Tech for Gamers wrote an article about Christian Svensson, who's the head of third party for Sony PlayStation. As Christian said here in an interview, he believes that Chinese and Korean studios specifically are actually outpacing and outdoing Western game studios by a landslide. One game brought up is Crimson Desert, which has sold over 6 million copies. It was also made in South Korea. And that game, in case you don't know, has been very heavily supported by Pearl Abyss since release. Like, the amount of updates that they've brought to that game since launch, it's staggering to say the least. It's nuts, actually. Crimson Desert, man, has had more updates in a month or two since release than most Western games will get in their entire lifetime. Anytime there's something wrong with Crimson Desert, like at all, Pearl Abyss immediately addresses it somehow. Then, as Digital Foundry reported here, you have stuff like the Oblivion remaster from Bethesda, which is now over a year old, and it's still not fixed from its launch problems. Digital Foundry showed here that in the latest version of Oblivion, the game actually gets worse the longer that you play it. The frames end up dropping to unacceptable levels, and there's still issues involving the game hard crashing as well. This is not unique to Oblivion, I know that. I mean, Starfield as well still doesn't run optimally and crashes constantly on PS5 Pro whenever I try to play that game too. It got so bad in Starfield's case, I would actively avoid the open world planet sections in it, because if I boosted too fast in the buggy vehicle, if there was too much foliage on the map or things going on, it would just crash my game 10 times out of 10 and just send me back to dashboard. Yet recently, I platinumed Yakuza Kiwami 3, and guess what? Zero issues. I'm playing the adventures of Elliot Millennium Tales. In terms of performance, nothing, no issues. It's always the Western games that run poorly. They also look worse, and are usually just worse games overall these days. I'm getting kind of tired of it. I think how Tech for Gamers puts it here is good. While budgets keep ballooning in the West, game development in Asia is progressing at a pace that is threatening Western dominance in the market. I would actually wager they already won the dominance a long time ago. I mean, Eastern games are smashing every expectation. Well, mostly. Not everything lands. The First Descendant isn't doing too hot. And some games didn't meet expectations because they changed too much, like a Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which shocked me, I gotta be honest. But overall speaking, most Asian games in general are, doing better, as Christian Svensson, head of Sony third party, said here. The pace at which I'm seeing teams in China and South Korea move are astonishing. The scale and the responsiveness in their approach, it's something that we're not necessarily seeing from some of our Western or even Japanese teams. It's really impressive. Svensson further stated, as seen here, that the dynamic of these developers is resulting in not only faster games that will run well, but they are also unique and better overall and more enticing as products for players to buy too, which I got to agree. I find myself almost always playing Asian-made games over Western ones when I can, really. I mean, going from Starfield to really anything I've played from the East recently is day and night. One feels like it's being held together by duct tape and glue in Starfield's case, whereas anything I play that's made by Asian developers is, as Todd Howard would once say, it just works. But it actually does just work. They don't just say that, unlike Todd Howard. I mean, things are bleak in Western game development, I know. Even George Broussard, who's the co-founder of 3D Realms, as seen here, is confirming that the wave of layoffs are soon going to come for ZeniMax, which, if you don't know, that's Bethesda. Broussard said, as Insider Gaming confirmed here, that he's heard there's layoffs coming at Bethesda for anybody who's not working on their core franchises like Elder Scrolls or Fallout. which means unfortunately places like id Software could have layoffs following Doom the Dark Ages or Arcane, which does Dishonored or Deathloop. But again, where do you hear this really in the East? Where are the mass layoffs at Capcom? Why is everyone there getting raises? While everybody in the West is pretty much hunkering down, just waiting for the artillery fire at this point. It kind of reminds me actually of what Hideaki Anno, that's the creator of Evangelion, a popular Japanese manga and anime, said earlier this year. This comes from Screen Rant. You see, Hideaki Anno believes that Asian developers of all kinds, doesn't matter what it is, anime, manga, games, whatever, they actually need to reject any Western influence, no matter what, at all costs. That's what he believes. He also thinks that audiences globally should have to adapt to what Asian developers make and not the other way around. Anno believes if Asian creators adapt to global sensibilities, they would actually lose what makes their art unique and important in the first place. Hideaki Anno believes accommodating for global audiences is actually what leads to the death of cultural specificity. It's why anime is so popular now, not because it is made for Western audiences, but because it is unapologetically Eastern by design. It's actually gotten to the point where Western creators have tried to push their own works as mangas when they aren't even Japanese, so it's not a manga. No matter what they try to do or say, it's all just wording things different to hit that vein of consumerism, hopefully. I think what Hideaki Anno says is exactly why Capcom and such have been doing so well for so long. Because objectively, prior to their 9-year hot streak of banger releases and record profits, Capcom, well, they were kind of struggling, but why was that? I mean, it's because Capcom, like Square Enix, thought that the future was to not embrace their uniquely Japanese identity in the global marketplace, but to instead make content they believed would fit in with Western audiences instead. This is why you had games like DMC, and I mean the Devil May Cry game that Ninja Theory got made, right? It was a bad attempt at Capcom trying to break a clearly Asian-made video game franchise into a westernized market by westernizing the very franchise made in Japan of all places. I mean, it didn't work clearly. DMC from Ninja Theory didn't do well enough for a sequel. Now Ninja Theory might get closed down by Microsoft amidst all the layoff rumors too. Yet clearly, once Capcom rejected that Western mindset and actually just went back to making games only they knew how to make in the way that they did it, well, what happened? Alright, salary increases, record profits, millions of copies sold every year without fail, and their new releases are selling millions each almost effortlessly, right? Most Western studios could only dream of having Capcom's numbers these days. But the reason that Capcom can do that is because they are doing exactly what Hideaki Anno said that they should be doing. They are making games meant for Asian players and sensibilities, and by retaining that cultural heritage that obviously only they would know how to do their way because they live there, the money flows regardless. I would never personally want to see Capcom westernize their franchises ever again. Devil May Cry 5 is selling like it's a new game, guys, every single year for like almost 10 years straight now. Well, I guess 8 years so far. Or no, 7 years, my bad, whatever, doesn't matter, because what Capcom created there is so uniquely Capcom, nobody else can replicate it. It's why I'm also happy to see places like Square Enix finally fully embracing the 2D HD aesthetic when it comes to games like Final Fantasy Resonance, or stuff like Adventures of Elliot recently, or even the Octopath games. I'm of the mind, I would actually, honestly, unironically love if the next Final Fantasy installment was in an HD 2D like version, and I'm not even kidding. If Square actually announced Final Fantasy 17 and it was an Octopath Traveler HD 2D looking game and it was turn-based and all of that, that's a day one buy. Are you kidding me? Oh my god, yes. Have you guys seen the Star Ocean Second Story remaster they made? That was done a few years ago. Like, that game looks amazing, dude. Seriously, if you haven't played that, Star Ocean Second Story R, like that's what it's called, please go play that game. It looks unbelievably good and it plays well too. It's an amazing game. And it also has great replay value because you can then play it through twice with 2 different hero paths, and you can only obtain actually half of the playable party members in a single playthrough anyways. So you get all the other stories and characters one way, and then your next playthrough you get the other ones, and it's not too long of a game either. Like, god, dude, I love Star Ocean 2, man, so much. It's such a good game. But again, I would love a new Star Ocean game that was made in the same way that Second Story R was done and looks like. Give me that retro 2D HD look. The budgets would obviously also be much smaller, and it would give the developers far more creative freedom to go crazy with features or worlds and release them more timely too, because they wouldn't be worried about making everything look super realistic all the time when they don't have to. I'm not gonna lie, I do like it when a game looks good, but like I already said, graphics for me, there aren't everything, right? Super Mario or old school Zelda isn't good because of their graphics. They're good because they're just fun to play, and that's the key here. I think what these Asian developers are doing is the way, right? Again, Blood Message looks insane. Even go look at Tides of Annihilation, which is essentially Final Fantasy 16 meets Devil May Cry, but you play a woman who has King Arthur powers or something. Like, dude, look how cool that game looks. You kidding me? That's probably also going to be a day one buy for me as well. Looking at the combat of Tides and the graphics, they're nice. Again, I'm not picky with the graphics, but hey, I got to admit, it looks good. But you wouldn't get this kind of stuff from the West. They're so unbelievably cooking their own industry over here. It would take them a miracle to drag themselves out of it. And it's kind of wild when you think about it. Like, the West is kind of stuck in a loop of layoffs, right? And closures and billion-dollar failures, like all of the time. Yet these Asian developers are just kind of doing something revolutionary. They're just making games that people want to play. I know, right? What a concept. Holy cow, they broke the code. There's no endless lectures. There's no desperate attempt to turn every game they own into a live service platform. Well, for the most part, they're just making games. And yet, despite the West and the publications thinking, oh no, this approach is outdated, you can't just make good games without lectures. Come on now. But no, they're doing that and they keep winning by doing it. They're just all bleeding themselves dry. And then Capcom, or even like From Software, they're just selling millions and building that momentum constantly. It's like Western publishers are holding these doom-pilling emergency meetings like every week, trying to figure out how to save themselves. Why aren't people buying our games? Why are they not showing up day one like they used to? What is going on now? And the Asian devs are just making games, right? Prioritizing one thing only, which is really just being fun to play. That's all it's got to be. The West doesn't really seem to understand this. They really thought that having a bigger budget would instantly mean better performing games. And also having more control over the player experience would be the better move. So many Western games these days hold your hand, as you know, man, and it's exhausting. I mean, look at every Sony first-party game made in the past, 8 years alone, I think. It's all like that. It could be simple, but it isn't. You always hear how games are taking forever to make, yet Capcom, they're releasing new Resident Evils every single year. Monster Hunter games too, and then some all the time. These are not just successful franchises. They are franchises that have experienced genuine revitalization, guys, and it wasn't through endless monetization or treating every player like a whale in terms of revenue. They just focused on making good games. Wow, what a radical business model. How could they? Imagine telling Western executives that customers enjoy buying quality products. The boardrooms would probably explode. All places like Capcom are doing is improving their gameplay, the performance so their games don't crash. And in turn, you get player satisfaction and it's working really well for them. And they just keep doing that, without treating their customers like laboratory test subjects when it comes to buying Western games day one. I remember playing Resident Evil Requiem when it came out. That game was so smooth, especially on the PS5 Pro. It was buttery smooth the day one. When was the last time I could say that about a Western game? Even From Software, who did Elden Ring and such, they're probably the best single example of a studio for this sort of phenomenon. Because if you listen to the industry analysts a decade ago, right, From Software's whole success strategy would have been seen as impossible or pointless. Because they're never chasing the modern engagement loops or the trends, right? They never hold your hand at all. They're infamous for that. And they never bog you down with microtransactions either. They kind of just trust their players. And think about how rare that has become today, Western games do that all the time. From Software actually just trusts you to learn their game, to fail even, and improve on your own. So From Software, kind of like Capcom, they treat you like you're an intelligent human being, and then they reward you for being that. Elden Ring didn't become what it was because it manipulated their players. It became what it was because it just respected you. That's a real distinction that many Western publishers kind of no longer seem capable of understanding. And honestly, I think that's where the real problem lies, because the biggest difference between many Eastern developers and the Western ones, it isn't really technology or even talent. Everyone has great tech, so to speak, in AAA to make games. There are plenty of talented Western developers, really, but they're being bogged down in the West by one thing that the East isn't doing, and that's philosophy. When you really look at it down to its core values, what is modern Western AAA development really? Really think about what the core thing that they're trying to do all the time with their games. And you know what it is? It's all about controlling the player. You, right? Your progression, your engagement, the matchmaking, even your rewards and how you obtain them, even down to trying to force you how to think now in these games. Everything is engineered this way from the beginning. And because of this, Western games, in my opinion, and the developers who make them, mostly, not all, but mostly, kind of forgot why people fell in love with games to begin with. We just want freedom, creativity, and discovery. You know, stuff like what Skyrim gave us and then some, Witcher 3 even. The feeling that the experience you are playing belongs to you, right? Not the corporation, you as an individual. We don't want to be micromanaged. This is a lesson that Eastern developers have learned like 10 years ago already. They know we just want to be entertained. They don't worry about how will we make every system be designed for maximized engagement. No, they're just making compelling gameplay. Why and how do we make Monster Hunter work so we can fill the spreadsheets, the Western developers would say. And Capcom's developers are just thinking we gotta make cool monsters and then make the armor and the weapons also cool to obtain. That's all we gotta do. And because of that, the spreadsheets fill anyways, right? Organically too, by the way. Now obviously, no industry is immune from economic realities. I know that. Japanese or Asian in general developers aren't living in some magical fantasy world where challenges don't exist for them, I know. But the scale of this crisis looks dramatically different when you compare it to the West. The tragedy here is that Western executives are often learning exactly the wrong lessons from their own failures. When a game gets rejected, they're blaming the marketing department. If players end up leaving, it's the visibility. That was the issue. If revenues aren't going the way that they wanted to, well, consumers didn't spend enough. Like, they never asked themselves the very obvious question. What if people just don't like the product that's being sold to them? Or maybe they're exhausted with being over monetized or being manipulated? Because it seems like they never really asked that question, because to do so, wow, that would be to admit that they're wrong, and we can't have that. You see, the reality is that maybe consumers aren't rejecting games, but they're just rejecting the philosophies behind them. And I think that's kind of why they're panicking the way that they are. And I think what's happening with Capcom or From Software and more, it should be so obvious as to why. We keep getting told that people don't buy games, or new games even, right? And instead people are just buying everything Capcom releases regardless, or From Software day one. Well, why are they doing that? I thought you guys said nobody buys new games, so what gives, right? Oh, right, it's because we actually like buying and playing games. We do that as long as they're actually good and not, well, whatever they're doing at some of these studios and publishers. You see, I think the reason that they, as in the West, need to understand the most here is that the audience and demand for good games, it never actually left. The passion for gaming as a whole is still there. What has disappeared, honestly, is patience. We're just tired of bad slop games, made with these arrogant philosophies and told that we have to accept them. Like, no thanks, I'll just reject your game if you do that. And I'll just save my money for the next cool Asian game instead, like Blood Message or Tides of Annihilation or whatever else. Because at least those developers are going to make great games still and not beat me over the head. And they trust me, hopefully, to figure out their games on their own. Mostly, some don't, but most do. And they're at least not trying to control every aspect of my experience like a God of War or something. Like, gaming should belong to players, right? Not corporations. They can push that all they want, but in the end, we still decide what becomes a franchise, right? Not the guys in the suits. And right now, too many Western publishers have kind of forgotten this, and that's why they're panicking so hard. So the next time layoffs happen, or some big game fails or whatever, I need them to remember, is it really our fault that your game failed? Or are you just making things for nobody again like you have the last 5 times? I mean, Capcom should be the blueprint. It's just too bad that right now they're kind of more an anomaly, because we all do deserve better. And if the West can't understand this, we'll have to keep drilling it into their skulls until they listen, I guess. Either way, thanks for being here. Subscribe if you want to. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go play some games made by people who don't hate me.